Welcome to the church family that is lifting lives through living love, inspiring hope, filling with faith, and transforming our world. These recorded messages are made available so that you might have additional opportunities to stay connected with us, and then you might learn and grow in your faith. God bless you as you hear the word today. And now, the message.
This morning's scripture comes from the book of Isaiah, chapter 9, verse 2, 6, and 7. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace, there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this.
As Sophie shared at the beginning of our service, we are in the middle of a series. Each week of December, we're thinking about Silent Night, Holy Night. This year marks the 200th anniversary of when it was first performed. And so each week we're taking a different verse and kind of reflecting on the meaning of that verse. This week we focus on the second verse, which began, as we said at the beginning, shepherds quake at the sight. You know, there's so much in our world to be afraid of, isn't it? Especially, we feel it all the time, how the news and our leaders, they often lead by fear, and yet the message of the angels was one of hope. Hope for not just the shepherds' lives, but for their nation, for their world, for our world. And so today we think about the message of hope that the angels gave and how that impacts our lives today. Last week we talked about peace. And in the context of peace, I shared the story of the Christmas Truce that took place in 1914 when the guns were halted in World War I for one day for people to make peace and remember Christ's entry into our world. Well, today I want to move from World War I to World War II, I guess, and share with you a clip of a film, one of my favorite films of all time that is set in World War II. The film is Life is Beautiful. It's a foreign film by Roberto Benigni. I don't know if any of you have ever seen this movie. You may, as soon as I said foreign film, you may think, oh, I'm not interested in that. But it's a beautiful, beautiful story about an Italian man named Guido whose family is rounded up in the concentration camps of World War II. And he's separated from his wife and left with his young son, and he knows instantly his mission is to protect his family, to protect his son, not just physically, but emotionally from everything that he's going to see and experience. And so as soon as they walk into the barracks, the father begins to make up a story, a game for his son. He says, this is a camp for games. This is all one big game, he says. And as he's beginning to kind of tell this story to his son, at that moment, 3 German soldiers walk in, and it's the perfect moment for him to spin this tale for his son. Check out this clip and you'll see what I mean.
Achtung, Ruhe! Gibt es hier einen Italiener, der Deutsch spricht?
Che ha detto? Cerca uno che parla tedesco, spiega tutte le regole del campo. Che sei, tedesco?
No. Alles herhören, ich sage das nur einmal.
Comincia il gioco. Chi c'è, chi non c'è, non c'è.
Ihr seid nur aus einem einzigen Grund in dieses Lager transportiert worden?
Si vince a 1000 punti. Il primo classificato vince un carro armato, vero?
Um zu arbeiten.
Beato lui.
Jeder Versuch der Sabotage wird mit dem sofortigen Tode bestraft. Die Hinrichtungen finden auf dem Hof durch Schüsse in den Rücken statt.
Ogni giorno vi daremo la classifica generale da quell'altoparlante là. All'ultimo classificato verrà attaccato con un cartello con su scritto asino, qui, sulla schiena.
Ihr habt die Ehre, für unser großes deutsches Vaterland arbeiten zu dürfen und am Bau des Großdeutschen Reiches teilzunehmen.
Noi facciamo la parte di quelli cattivi che urlano. Chi ha paura perde punti.
3 Grundregeln solltet ihr nie vergessen. Erstens, versuche nicht zu fliehen. Zweitens, folge jedem Befehl ohne Fragen. Drittens, jeder Versuch eines Aufstandes wird mit dem Tod durch Erhängen bestraft. Ist das klar?
In 3 casi si perdono tutti i punti. Li perdono. 1, quelli che si mettono a piangere. 2, quelli che vogliono vedere la mamma. 3, quelli che hanno fame e vogliono la merendina. Scordatevela!
Ihr solltet glücklich sein, hier arbeiten zu dürfen. Es wird niemandem etwas geschehen, der die Vorschriften befolgt.
È molto facile perdere punti per la fame. Io stesso ieri ho perso 40 punti perché volevo a tutti i costi un panino con la marmellata.
Gehorsamkeit ist alles.
Dal bicocche.
Und noch etwas.
Lui di fragole.
Bei diesem Pfiff. Alles raus auf den Hof, aber schnell.
Ah, non chiedete i lecca perché non ve li danno. Ce li mangiamo tutti noi.
Antreten in Zweierreihe.
Io ieri ne ho mangiati 20.
Schweigend.
Un mal di pancia.
Jeden Morgen.
Però erano buoni.
Ist Appell.
Lascia fare.
So, das wollte ich euch noch sagen. Dort hinten werdet ihr arbeiten. Ihr werdet die Dimensionen des Lagers leicht begreifen.
Scusate se vado di fretta, ma oggi sto giocando a nascondino. Ora vado, se no mi fanno tana.
If you've ever seen Life is Beautiful, hopefully that little teaser will convince you to invest some time and watch it. It's an amazing story. The father finds himself in a camp with his son, a place designed to destroy hope. And what does the father do? He offers him a story, a different way of perceiving the realities that are taking place around him. Now, this is a fictional movie, of course, but we know that this was a real thing that happened in our world. We know this in a very intimate way here because Eva Kor came to our church just a few months ago. And she shared firsthand what she experienced. And we know that everything that took place in a Nazi concentration camp was designed to destroy hope. From the way they separated families, to the clothes they had to wear and the conditions in which they had to sleep and eat, and the tasks, the menial, brutal tasks and experiments that they gave to the people. I mean, everything was designed to destroy hope, and yet Eva Kor reminded us that hope lived, that people clung to it and held on to it, and that hope was the thing that kept them going. But what is hope? I mean, it's one of those things that's really hard to define. You know when you got it, you know when you've lost it. But how do we understand hope? What is it? I mean, at a real basic level, hope is a belief or conviction that things are going to get better. I mean, at its simplest form, that's what it is. It's a belief that whatever we're experiencing right now, it will not last forever. There is something better on the horizon. And whatever we're experiencing right now, it might even be preparing us for whatever that other might be. That's what hope is. It is always future-oriented. It envisions a possibility of a better future. But even though it's future-oriented, it is presently felt. Right now is when you experience the power of hope, because it gives us courage to keep moving on in whatever darkness we may be facing. Because it is future-oriented, hope is not based on your present circumstances. Yes, circumstances can set you back. They can wound your hope, but they don't necessarily kill it. The Apostle Paul, writing to the Corinthians, he describes this kind of experience of what keeps him going. He says, we carry about in us this treasure in earthen vessels. And so we are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed. What keeps them in each case from being crushed, driven to despair, forsaken, destroyed? It is hope that sustains people. I've seen it again and again and again as a pastor, as a chaplain. I've seen how people amazingly seem to hold on to hope even when their present circumstances fall apart. I mean, hope is amazingly resilient and malleable. It can change over time. I've seen people go from being diagnosed with cancer, and their first hope is for a cure, right? And then I've seen people go from that when the doctor comes back with the bad news that it's not working the way they thought. Well, they move from that to then moving to, I want to enjoy life. I want to have a good quality of life. And then they move from that to, I want to have a meaningful death. I want to be peaceful and surrounded by loved ones. And they move from that to where it's not even about them anymore. They begin to hope from their spouse and their children and their grandchildren. It's like a trapeze artist letting go of one swing in order to take hold of the next. What enables people to do that? It's hope. Hope after hope after hope. And I don't know what enables us to do it, but I've seen it time and again. God places that ability inside the human soul, inside of all of us, this ability to hope, and it's hope that sustains us through all of life's transitions. So if that's what hope does, what happens when hope is gone? Well, without hope, we become violent, destructive, as Andy Crouch says. I mean, there's a reason why whenever someone breaks up with us, the first thing we do is we go for the tub of ice cream, right? Like, all hope is gone, I might as well let the waistline go too, right? Like, there's a reason. We just, without hope, we live by fear. Without hope, we live for the present moment without any concern for the future. I have to take a more serious example. You think about those who struggle with addiction when they experience a setback. Without hope, they destroy themselves. They just engage in destructive behavior without any thought of the future anymore. When the Germans were losing the war, that's when they became most violent, most destructive. The final solution was the mass killing of those in their concentration camps. It becomes destructive. It happened again in our own community back in September when Eva Kor came. A father killed his children and then killed himself. And we all wondered, everyone is asking, how could someone do that? And I still don't know, but I know part of it is he had no hope. And without hope, we become destructive. So what kills hope? In his book, Agents of Hope, Donald Capps lists three things that he says are the killers of hope in our world. The first, he says, is despair. A sense that the future is bleak and dark, and nothing we do is ever going to change that. Despair. Secondly, he says it's apathy. Because the thing is we are connected one to another, and our hope is connected. But whenever we cease caring about other people and their conditions, we think maybe we're protecting and inoculating ourselves, but what we're really doing is isolating others. And in isolation, hope dies. And then the third thing that kills hope, he says, is shame. A loss of self-worth and self-esteem, the feeling that my life doesn't matter, that I have nothing to offer. I mean, nothing gives people value more than being seen. And shame says that whatever is in you isn't worth being seen. It makes people hide, and that destroys their hope. It doesn't take too much imagination, does it, to think about how despair and apathy and shame run rampant in the world. But my question to you today is, which one of those three strikes closest to your heart? If there's one of them to which you find yourself susceptible, that you struggle with? Is it despair? Is it apathy? Is it shame? What's killing your hope sometimes? And so let me get to how do we battle these killers of hope? Last week I said that the killer of peace was violence, but the antidote to violence was forgiveness. That whenever we forgive someone who commits violence against us, who violates us, whenever we forgive, we're released from the cycle. So what's the antidote to hopelessness? I think it's story. You see, story connects us to a past, and story connects us to a future. It tells us there's much more than just this present moment in which we live. Story kills despair because it reminds us that there's another chapter to be told, and maybe what we're experiencing now prepares us. Maybe we can't get to that next chapter without going through whatever we're going through right now. Story kills apathy because in a story, characters are connected. One person's actions impact another. And then finally, story kills shame because story tells us that every character, every single person is important. Your life matters. The story can't be told without you. Story kills the killers of hope. Let me give you an example of this. This comes from a book called A Million Miles in 1,000 Years by Donald Miller. Actually, the quote on the back of the bulletin is also from this book. I forgot to cite it when we printed the bulletin. Donald Miller tells the story of a father who was losing hope for his daughter. This father was really struggling. His daughter, for the longest time was kind of this perfect kid and did all the right things and went to church and loved God. And all of a sudden, he said it was like an alien came in and replaced her. He just lost his daughter. It started when she started dressing all in black and got into this goth culture and wearing weird dark makeup and having piercings in strange places. And he says, then it was her grades started slipping. And then she started dating this boyfriend that was bad news. I knew he was bad news. And then she was fighting and rebelling all the time, especially when it came to church and faith. Like she just wouldn't go to church. And the more I pushed, the more she pulled away. And then finally, he said that for this dad, the straw that broke the camel's back was when they found drugs in her room. And at that point, he didn't know what to do. He went to Donald Miller and says, I don't know what to do. I've tried punishment. I've tried grounding her. I've tried restricting and limits, and everything I do, she just moves further and further and further away from me. Help me. You're supposed to be an expert in these kinds of things. And Donald Miller thought about it for a little bit, and he says, well, you're not going to like this, but I think what your daughter is doing is she's looking for a better story. What? But Dad said, well, the story you're telling is that she's not good enough, that no matter what she does, she doesn't measure up, that she has to be perfect to get your approval and acceptance. And she's rejecting that story for her life, and she's seeking out another story, even though what she's choosing is a bad story. If you don't offer her a better one, then she's not going to come back to you. And the dad kind of took that in, and he thought about it for a period of time. And maybe a week later, he called his family together around the kitchen table, said, we have to have a family meeting. And he told his family, he said, I've been thinking about it. I've been doing some research. And there's this organization that builds orphanages around the world. And it costs about $25,000 to build an orphanage. And there's this village down in Mexico, and they need an orphanage. And so we're going to build an orphanage as a family. We don't have $25,000 right now, but we're going to figure it out. We are going to build this orphanage. And he said around the table, the dad said there was just stunned silence, especially from his wife, whom he did not speak to before he shared this plan with the family. He said it was a chilly night when he came to bed that night. The next morning, he went to his wife and he apologized. He said, I know I should have talked to you beforehand. I just needed to. And she said, it's okay. It's okay. I was caught off guard, but we got bigger fish to fry. We got an orphanage to build. Let's get busy. And so they started talking about as a family and how they were going to do this. And then as they were doing that, a few days later, the dad said there was a knock on our door as we were going to bed that night. It was our daughter who came in the room. And she said, hey, can I talk to you guys for a little bit? And he said she crawled in bed with us, which she hadn't done in years. And she started talking about this orphanage, and she started saying, Dad, we don't know anything about this place. We don't know anything about these people. We need to go there. We need to go down and take pictures and get video and talk to this, see what the need is. And then I have to build a website. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we need to do. And I think it starts with you and me. We got to go down there. Well, and the story kept going and going. And Donald Miller kind of lost touch a little bit. But maybe 9 months to a year later, he ran into his friend again. He says, hey, how's it going? Are you guys building that orphanage? And the dad said, yeah, we're close. We almost got all our money raised. That's awesome. That's great. What about your family? What about your daughter? How is she doing? And the dad kind of smiled and he says, well, you know what? It's funny you should ask. She just broke up with that boyfriend 2 days ago because he called her fat. And then he said, she's the hero of her own story now. And a girl that's the hero of her own story doesn't date a loser who makes her feel small. She knows who she is now. She just forgot it for a little bit. See, that's the power story has. In that last line, the dad said, she knows who she is now. She just forgot it for a little while. I feel like that story, that line, is the theme of the Old Testament when it comes to Israel. It's also the theme of the church today. We just forget who we are again and again and again. And so did the people Israel. They forgot that God had given them a story that said, out of all the peoples of the earth, I have chosen you. I have named you after myself. I rescued you from the people of Egypt, and I gave you my Torah. I gave you my laws that you might be a light unto the nations. That was their story, but they forgot their identity again and again and again, and they kept chasing after bad things. And God had to keep bringing them back and back and back. But it's in the times of greatest darkness, it's in those moments that the prophets speak most poetically, reminding the people of Israel of their story, who they belong to, what their future is. And Isaiah, the scripture that Sarah read just a few moments ago, is one of those prophecies given to the people of Israel in a time of darkness. And Isaiah said unto them, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in a land of the shadow of death, on them a light has dawned. You are not forgotten. You are not forsaken. You still belong to God, and He has a future for you. On them light has dawned. It's a powerful image, isn't it? Light. I have this little flashlight up here. I got this sucker for $1 at Walmart. This is not one of those expensive tack lights that you see on TV where I could run over my car, run over it in my car and it'd still survive. I got it for $1. You can't even see the light, can you? Like if I point, well, you can see if I point it right at you, but like if I point up, you can't track it. It's not powerful enough in this space because there's so much other light around us. But when we go down to Haiti, and when the nights are dark, especially if there's an overcast sky, because they don't have street lamps like we do. And if there's an overcast sky where there's no stars and no moonlight, and you're trying to navigate roads and pathways that are uneven, you better believe this little bit of light of mine, it makes a huge difference. You see, even the smallest light can cut through darkness. Because darkness is not a positive force. Darkness is just the absence of light. And as soon as light shows up, even in a small candle or a small flashlight, it puts darkness on the run. Jesus was born at a time of great darkness for the people of Israel. They were under the rule of Rome. They saw no future, no end in sight. Despair, apathy, shame were rampant. They thought, we've been forgotten, we've been forsaken, we've been abandoned. God doesn't hear our prayers anymore. And in the midst of that darkness, a tiny little light appeared. On one single night in the town of Bethlehem, the angels sang. And we believe that this tiny light that showed was the same one that Isaiah prophesied about when he told the people of Israel, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this." You see, our story is that Jesus is the light of the world, that he is the wonderful counselor and mighty God, the everlasting Father and the Prince of Peace. And once the light came into the world, it only grew and grew and grew and grew. As Jesus did his public ministry, it was darkness on the run. He reached out and shared his light to everyone who was in darkness, whether it was the poor or the leper or the sick, or the prostitute or the sinner, anyone who was outcast, anyone who felt, God doesn't love me anymore. Those were the people to whom Jesus reached to share his light in the darkest of places. And when the forces of darkness gathered and nailed him to a cross, even then, the light didn't go out. As the Apostle John declares, he says, "This is our testimony, that the light shines in the darkness. And the darkness did not, cannot, will not ever overcome it." You see, Jesus rose from the grave. He defeated sin and death. And his light is with his people now and forever. That is our story, a story of irrepressible hope. And we believe in a future when Jesus, our light, will return. And in that day, he will put on the run all darkness. There will be no more despair, no more apathy, no more shame. There will just be love and love and love again. Love will reign eternal. And that is our story. That is our hope that we celebrate this Christmas. So if you're struggling with hope this Christmas, let me share with you 3 things that I want you to do. The first is I want you to name your story. Name your story. Because when you're trapped in present darkness, you feel like, I'll never break through. But remember your story. Remember any time that you've been in darkness before. Remember, the people who've been a part of your life. Where have you seen light? Where has God shown up? Remember those things. Name them. And that might give you hope for the future. And then the second part is then to name your future. To remember that this is not the end, that there is a light coming. And what is that future that you can envision for your own life? I love this quote from Reverend Chiku, who is the pastor of Paradise United Methodist Church. A friend, a member of our church sent it to me. She found it on Reverend Chiku's Facebook page. But he said to his people right after the wildfire took away their town, he said to them, "Be the kind of people that walk through fire carrying buckets of water for others." He painted a picture for them of a future where they didn't just survive the fire, but where they came through the fire to be a source of hope and inspiration for others. What is the future that God might give you? How might he redeem even this momentary darkness that you're going through? And then the third thing is remember. Remember that you are part of a bigger story. That this story is one that we share together. This story we share is about the world and about God's kingdom being created, God's kingdom being established, that what the prophet said is coming true in our midst, that of his kingdom and of his peace, there will be no end. And we get to be part of that story. So how does the story end? I'm speaking of the life is beautiful. How does that story end? What happens after this father tells his son this story about a game and points and a tank? Well, towards the end of the movie, I'm not going to give it all away, but The Germans know they're losing, and so they begin rounding up the inhabitants of the camp and moving them, putting them on trains and moving them deeper into other concentration camps further within Germany. And the father knows this is the moment when he has to protect his son. This is the moment when all hope is lost for the Germans and where they're going to be most violent, most destructive. So he hides his son away and he tells him, stay here through the night. If you do not move, if you successfully hide all night long, you'll get the 1,000 points. You'll win the tank. And then the next morning, this happens.
Hi, boy. You all alone? What's your name? You don't understand what I'm saying, do you? We'll give you a lift. Come on. Come on, get up here. Stop!
Questa è la mia storia.
Mamma!
Questo è il sacrificio che mio padre ha fatto.
Giosuè!
Questo è stato il suo regalo per me.
Abbiamo vinto!
Sì, abbiamo vinto. Giosuè.
1000 punti da schiantare, da ridere. Primi si ritorna a casa col carro armato. Abbiamo vinto!
Not exactly a Christmas movie, but I love the last lines. This is my story. This is the sacrifice that the Father made. This is his gift to us. That's what Christmas is about. His gift to us is a child, a son who has been born to us, a son who secures our hope both now and forevermore. Because in the end, we win. Love wins the day. And that's what we celebrate every single Christmas. Amen. Amen.